Hi from my journal and welcome back to my channel. I'm Denise and today I want to talk about my starter fountain pens. In a previous video, I talked about my modest fountain pen collection, but today we're talking about the pens that started it all for me. And while I don't really consider these pens part of my main fountain pen collection, I still want to give props to some of these pens that got me started in the rabbit hole that is fountain pens and fountain pen inks. Every hobby has to start somewhere, and sometimes when we start something, it can be difficult to find or navigate our way through. And while there are a lot of resources available on YouTube and other websites, pen selection is still very much trial and error. But that's okay, and that's where the fun is, learning what pens to try out. What works well for others may not work that well for you. What some consider a dud pen might be the best one for you. And that's the joy in starting a fountain pen collection. Recently, somebody asked me a question on what I could recommend in terms of fountain pens for beginners. So I am just a fountain pen newbie myself. I only got interested in fountain pens in 2020. Primarily, I started getting into fountain pens because I was curious about the experience of owning a fountain pen, and also I was curious about all these different ink that was available to people who love notebooks and journals. So I started looking around on YouTube and Instagram and getting inspiration. And of course, a lot of the vlogs that I follow will have their own recommendations of fountain pens for beginners. And being Filipino and living in Metro Manila, a lot of these brands are either not available in my country or they can be very expensive. So the best solution for me was to turn to your favorite shopping apps. When you look through YouTube, when you look through the fountain pen videos of the fountain pen and journaling community, you will find a lot of recommendations on what fountain pen is best for beginners. And they would mention brands like Kaweco, Perco, or other brands like the Pilot Kakuno. I remember buying one of those disposable fountain pens before that really didn't get me hooked into fountain pens per se. And then in 2020, I started to get interested in using a lot of different fountain pen inks, but I couldn't really afford any of the branded ones. So I did a little exploring on Shopee and found that there were a bunch of generic, non-branded fountain pens like this one. And some of these go for less than 100 pesos. So to start with, I ordered a bunch of these generic demonstrator starter pens. This one is Wing S, but I really can't find the link or the shop where I bought it as it was some time ago. But as far as cheap generic fountain pens went, these were really good. These were not bad starter fountain pens for a beginner like me 2 years ago. For one thing, they're very cheap. They're affordable. So like I mentioned, these pens go for like 90 pesos to 110. So I thought at the time it was a good starting point because I'm one of those fountain pen owners who drop their pens and pencils quite a lot. And that was one of my concerns when I was starting out. Like, what if I drop it? Will I break it? So, you know, if I ended up dropping one of these cheap ones and they break, I wouldn't feel that terrible about it. So, but I was pleasantly surprised because some of these pens were really good writers. And in fact, I filled out one of these generic fountain pens with Ferris Wheel Press's Spruce County Post, and not bad. It writes pretty well. This one has a fine nib, so working with ink, filling this up with ink is not bad. It writes really well and it serves its purpose. It's a very serviceable pen. I would actually recommend these types of pen to absolute beginners who want to play with ink, who want to check out if a fountain pen suits them in terms of the trouble involved in cleaning them after. I've had to thoroughly clean out my old fountain pens. Don't do what I did and leave the ink just in the pen for more than a year, because it will dry out your pen and ruin the feed. I'm still hoping that I could save this pen and be able to use it and re-ink it with the new ink I have. I mean, even though these are cheap, I still want to be able to use them, because they're good writers. Okay, so I have one of these Kaweco Percos, and this did not come cheap. This one came at 110 pesos. I bought this at like 795. And it's a cheap plastic pen. Pretty basic. The only thing going for it is that it's a Kaweco. This is a pretty disappointing beginner's pen, if you ask me. But what I liked about this pen was that it had a medium nib, and when I used it, it wrote well, and I like the thickness of the nib. The thing with this is, if you are the type of pen owner that drops their pens and you drop this, it can break pretty easily. So that's what happened here. I dropped it once, and as soon as I dropped it, I started experiencing problems with it right away, such as leakage. The ink started spilling from the feed. Whenever I used it, the ink flow became unpredictable. And I made a mistake with this once. I forgot that you were supposed to twist it, and I ended up forcing it. So I essentially broke this pen. I don't know if I can still save it, but I still keep it around, hoping that I might come across a solution so I could still use this, because I don't want to waste it. I feel bad for spending almost 1,000 pesos on a plastic pen like this. Another thing that I didn't like about the Kaweco Perco is that, unlike these generic pens, I couldn't use a dropper, an ink dropper with them, because of the hole at the end. So this needs a converter for you to use it, or a cartridge. I think with a cartridge, you wouldn't experience problems writing with it. But I tried to use it with a converter, and it ended up being really messy. What I liked about these generic pens is that you can either use a converter or just drop the ink with a syringe or a dropper, and it can hold a substantial amount of ink. So this one cost me almost 1,000 pesos. This one is like 100. So there. Another thing that I like about having these cheap yet serviceable pens is I don't have to be too precious about them. Like, if I drop them, it won't be such a big deal. I can keep them in a pen holder for easy access on my work table. If I lose them, I won't feel too bad about losing them. If I drop them and they break, I won't feel too bad either. Though with the Kaweco Perco, I kind of had to get over my disappointment with this one. But these generic fountain pens are just super reliable. And for their price, I really can't complain. I hope this video has been successful in giving you ideas on which fountain pens to look for. So good luck finding that perfect first pen, and don't forget to have fun. Bye guys, thanks for watching!